Hello, low ego action heroes. It's Debbie Levitt from DeltaCX.com, and today is Wednesday, November 4th, 2020, and it's episode 86. I got the number right today. This one is UX job application pitfalls and dangers. And this one grew out of an episode we did a week or two ago where we were talking about jobs that ask for your social security number just to apply. And then we were like, holy crap, this needs its own episode. So for that, I'm going to bring in today's special guest, a first-time guest here on the show, Nick Morgan. And Nick, while I press a whole bunch of buttons, tell everybody all about you.
Hey everyone, my name's Nick Morgan. I'm a UX designer. I've been doing UX design for about 20 years. I've worked for small companies and large enterprises, armies of one, teams of 100 or more on various projects for consumer products as well as business-to-business applications. I'm currently the information architect, UX architect at H5, which is a legal tech company based out of San Francisco. I'm also doing some consulting work for Cisco. I'm a mentor at Springboard, which is an online UX course and big data course for students where they pair with a mentor once a week for 6 to 9 months. I'm a subject matter expert as well, doing portfolio reviews and whiteboard challenges. And I'm also a founder of a health and wellness startup in Portland and mentor at the Portland Incubator Experiment. And in my spare time, whenever that is, I like to write books. So I'm working on a book to introduce UX to students and new people getting into the career.
Super, fantastic. Thank you so much. And where can people find you in the Twitterverse or website verse?
Sure. So everything is iloveuxdesign.com. That's ILOVEUXDESIGN. You can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Etsy, where I have a lot of cool products that are UX design branded, like this t-shirt.
Very cool. Yes, if you're listening audio only, you are missing out. So you're going to have to find Nick on LinkedIn and everywhere in the verse. Nick is N-I-C-K, Morgan, M-O-R-G-A-N. Of course, we are live. So if you're joining us on LinkedIn or YouTube, you can ask questions live. I'm ready for those. And of course, you can't. Nobody's done it, but you can tweet them with hashtag DeltaCX, and my system should catch them. So again, let's just jump in and take questions as they come in. Thinking back to when we had that discussion in an earlier podcast about should you give your social security number or the last 4 digits of your social security number to apply for a job, what's your thoughts there?
It's so perplexing, especially for designers that are just starting out. You really want to get that first job, and the opportunity is so close you can smell it. So, it's an opportune moment for people that want to get that sensitive information to get it from you. Usually they'll give you some reasoning like, oh, well, we need it to, make your ID unique in case there's another Nick Morgan and we have some other number that helps, identify you.
And somehow they have the same email address as you.
It's pretty wild. Yeah, I know, right? Well, I have a million email addresses, so there could be multiple Nick. There are actually 2 other Nick Morgans and in UX. So yeah, I guess if they're all applying for the same job at the same time, that is interesting. But yeah, so you may be inclined to give that information, but you can literally, it's illegal to get your social security number before you are employed by a job, at least in the United States. I'm not sure about anywhere else. So you can push back on that, and I obviously encourage you to. You can tell them any other information that is non-personal that you want to give as an ID in place of that social security number. I'm not really sure what works for you, but
yeah, and I think I'd mentioned in that last podcast that the last time someone asked me for that, I said, I'm not giving you that. And they're like, last 4? And I said, no, because you can call up my cell phone company, the internet company, they always ask, what's the last 4 of your social security number? Now you're going to know that. So it doesn't make sense to give away something that could possibly give access to your stuff. So what the person said to me at the time was, well, what about some other 4 numbers you'd remember? And I said, here's the last 4 of my phone number. I mean, the reality is you don't even have to fight it. You could just give them any numbers. Who's going to say, wait a minute, that's not your social security number? You could say, What are the last four digits of my phone number? What is my phone number? 2440. How do you know? Yeah. How do you know? So
Yeah.
Protect yourself.
Yeah, they'll also ask you for the month and date of your birth as well, in a combination. Like, oh, we need these two pieces of info. One time, I had a recruiter ask for my entire social security number, and I pushed back, and I almost hung up. I mean, I pretty much said no, thank you, and let me talk to your manager a little bit.
Yeah, these are, and I think these probably are 50% chance it's a phishing scam.
Yeah. I mean, I usually do a pretty thorough search of the company. Anytime anybody reaches out to me or anytime I interact with someone, I like to know who I'm talking to. So I do my own research. And oftentimes these companies are, they have their fingers on the pulse of jobs, and they are legitimate companies. I'm not sure how legitimate some of their actors are, or if somebody could just literally sign up for a LinkedIn account and say they work somewhere legitimate and go phishing. That's
true.
kind of the whole premise, right?
Yeah, very good point. They could say they work at that legitimate company, and how can you prove they do or don't, especially if they've made a matching LinkedIn account? Let's talk about something that happens to, unfortunately, all of us, sometimes weekly: getting ghosted. What's up with getting ghosted, and is there something we can do about it?
Yeah, so I usually use the squeaky wheel method, which is become a squeaky wheel. And by that, I mean, email them, message them. Obviously, don't be annoying, but at the same time, let them know that your presence is there. But yeah, that really can't stop you from being ghosted. It can only remind them that you're there. And at the same time, it's common courtesy for us as candidates to, thank the people that we interact with when we are invited to an interview. And it's frustrating at minimum to not get that same kind of return of interaction,
Okay, so let's make sure that after we have an interview, we thank people, thank the HR person, thank the recruiter, thank the people you met, and as for getting ghosted, I think I don't know if this is what you meant, but I think I would only follow up with people if I had the interview. I'm not sure if I would follow up with people just because I applied, because I might have been one out of 500 applications.
Yeah, chances are you won't get any contact back if that's the approach from the initial application. But yeah, like anytime you actually talk to somebody or email with them that they reach out to you, I think is a good time to create that rapport and show them that you care and that you want the job. But fly casual, as they say in Star Wars, right?
So don't be that person. Don't be, what was it? I saw the video today about the backstory of the meme overattached girlfriend. Like, don't be overattached crazy eyes girlfriend. Like, you haven't written me back.
Yeah, and there's hundreds of people applying. I mean, one of the things you may encounter when you want to thank them is that there will be like one point of contact, and that's usually the HR person or an agency that's a recruiter. And so you're not going to get the email address or the contact information. Back to that personal information, rule that we just talked about. You're not going to get that information of the people working at that company. It's just not something that they're going to give you. So if you're going to thank the rest of the people in the group, whether or not you remember their names, because there might have been a group of people, send it to that HR person, and you can either put quotes in it or say, please send this message along to everybody I spoke with. And that's one way that you can show you care and kind of be that squeaky wheel, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, sometimes it can take sometimes a week, sometimes it can take months to get a job. And that time to fill is what that's called, when the job is posted and when somebody actually fills that position.
And I would make sure to bring a little note paper or something and write down everybody's names, because I think it goes a long way if you say, hey, thanks, HR person. I really enjoyed meeting Nick and Bob and Debbie and Sam, and say hi to them for me. I don't have their personal contact information, but please thank all of them for me, rather than like, hey, thanks. Those people I talked to were nice. I didn't get all their names.
Yeah. So you were paying attention. Yeah. Be prepared.
I work in CX and UX, and I have great attention to detail, but who did I just meet? So Oops. We have a couple of notes that we wrote before our adventure together, and one of them says, keep applying until the first day of work. Talk about that piece of advice a little bit, please.
Great. Yeah. So, in the earlier part of my career, when I got a call, when I got an interview, I would tell everybody, and that is probably not the best method. Jobs evaporate in thin air. Even if you're the most qualified candidate, somebody else might be more qualified, and so I tend to, at least personally, keep my cards close and not really broadcast that I'm, you know, working somewhere, and to celebrate that fact until I'm actually working there. Even, between the time that the contract is signed and your first day, anything could happen. The budget could get pulled, anything really. So I tend to give advice and follow that advice of, not mentioning to the world that you work somewhere until you actually work there. And by that, also applying, until the ink is dry, so to speak, but even past the ink drying and you've, uh, opened your laptop for the first day of work, anything can change.
And
It
we've
might.
certainly seen
So
that in the pandemic, where a lot of people had job offers or had signed deals or had internships, and they unfortunately evaporated between the pandemic or the economy. So sometimes it's best to kind of keep that a little bit close to the chest until it's really there.
yeah, I mean, I've been through two or three .com bubbles and bursts, and the pandemic is, like you said, a whole new world. Little Disney reference for you there, Debbie. Um, exactly.
Don't want to get
So,
copy struck.
yeah, no, 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 definitely, I didn't sing it either. Right.
Right.
Yeah, it's wild how even at this late stage of the year when things are usually pretty quiet, there's a lot of job activity. I've never seen it in my previous years, even just watching as an observer. I've just never seen this amount of activity. It's kind of calming down because of the last 2 months of the year, but much more busy than usual. And I think the pandemic had played a large part in that.
Yeah, so for those joining, we do have some people live in the chat. Remember, you can ask your questions, and we do have our first two questions coming in. So again, just to rephrase that one, keep applying until you start the job. Don't. I once had that once where a very famous company said, "Oh my God, we loved you, we want you, we're going to send you an offer letter," and I stopped interviewing because I figured I've got this, and I never heard from those people again. Literally, I didn't hear sorry. I didn't hear we ran out of budget. I didn't hear everybody died. I literally never heard from them again. And now I tell people, keep interviewing. Don't assume you've got it in the bag, even if they tell you they're going to send you an offer letter. And
Yeah.
another question before we go to the question in the chat room. What's your opinion when you're being interviewed, either by HR or the hiring manager, somebody, and they say something like, where else are you interviewing? Or how many other places are you interviewing? Well, how much information would you reveal to a job about your job search?
I liken it to a bit of a poker match. And I've never been great at poker, but a couple of rules could still apply. Um, hmm. So maybe I am good at poker, and I'm just telling you I'm not good at poker. But
You got me.
a couple of I know, right? So yeah, you want to, it's really none of their business. And if you tell a recruiter or you tell a company, "Hey, I have an offer. What are you going to do about it?" It shows them that you're not their priority. That they're not your priority, rather.
Right.
If you have company A and company B, and company B says, "Hey, you interviewing anywhere else?" And they're, "Oh, I got an offer from company A." They're going to be like, "Oh, well, now we're like second best." That's at least we have to come up with an offer, and it puts undue pressure on the company to make you an offer, and they don't have that pressure. Candidates have the pressure to decide, but companies can take their time and often do.
Yeah, and usually my answer for that is I'm actively interviewing at this time. And sometimes they'll say like, well, do you have any offers yet? Which is obviously them trying to figure out how fast they have to move. And
Right.
typically I don't, just because things usually move fast for me from offer to starting. But typically I might say, well, I'm interviewing at multiple jobs. In some cases I'm past to the first interview. I haven't received an offer yet, but I imagine one could come soon.
Yeah, and that brings up an interesting point. Every job, every company has a different number of steps in the process to fill a candidacy for their job. But I was going to say that when you are being asked, do you have any offers on the table? Typically, an agency, which is like a third party company that recruits for their client, which is the company you actually end up designing for, that agency they get paid when you get hired. They get paid when you get the job. So they are constantly pressuring the candidates to apply. Where are you at? Where are you going to do? Because it's basically their lifeblood is on the line. Whereas at a company, an HR person that is employed by a company, they don't have that kind of pressure. It's all internal. They just get paid a normal salary, so they're not getting paid when you get hired or any kind of incentive to bring you on as quickly as possible. So you'll probably see that urgency from outside agencies. But then as you get further into the process with the company, the internal recruiter may reach out and ask, what kinds of opportunities you're currently exploring and what you're at. So that's just a little bit of a nuance between when they might ask and who might ask.
Super, thanks. Let's go to some of the questions that have started to come in. Shreya is writing on LinkedIn and says, there's two questions here. One is, do you suggest junior designers to start off as a generalist or be more specific in their role?
Oh, goodness. I
Yeah.
get this question a lot. And, I do talk to a lot of student designers, and they are usually educated to become a generalist. And so they have kind of what I would call like a mostly full stack approach to design. But when you first start out, depending on it sort of depends on the company. But when you first start out, chances are you might not be at that generalist level because the generalist tends to have more of an overarching strategy involvement with folks that are much higher up. At least that's been my experience. And this is me. Like when I started, I somehow lucked out and started as a senior UI designer. That's kind of unheard of right now, right?
Right.
It happens though. But for people just getting into the career, there's not you might not have a lot of experience launching products or launching suites of products, and so being a generalist is a lot of pressure and not a risk that companies are usually willing to take. You might be a generalist among a few generalists that are able to specialize more, a little bit, and then maybe cover each other's blind spots, so to speak, in the general sense. But that tends to happen at a smaller company like startups that are not averse to risk, that they actually want to invest in junior designers and willing to give them a chance, and are probably a little bit more design centric. I think at least that's been my experience. What are your
Yeah,
thoughts?
and my concern on that one is two things. Number one, not everybody is good at multiple things. But I know a lot of people feel pressured to do multiple things because they see so many jobs that say UX UI or UX front end dev or UI front end or whatever.
Certainly.
So thing one, are you good at those things? It doesn't make sense to sell yourself as a generalist if you stink at these things or if you don't enjoy doing them, because then they'll be part of your job and you're doing them. The other thing is, now you've got two or three things you have to prove you're great at. Instead of just proving you're great at interaction design and prototyping, now you've got to prove you're great at interaction design, prototyping, UX research, visual design, design systems, accessibility, front-end dev. And to me, that's just more stuff you've got to prove that you're good at, because while some companies have low standards, if a company has even medium standards, they should be checking how good you are at all of these things, not just some of them.
Absolutely. One of the advices that I like to give Advices might not be a word.
I liked it
Some of the
though.
advice that I like to give, advices. It's like maths.
It's
We
like
always do it.
mouses.
It's like mouses. So some of the advice that I like to give designers, or at least ask them to kind of inquire within about where they see themselves. And one of the questions I ask is that I believe that there are three legs to user experience design. There's visual design, interaction design, and research. And that little trifecta is kind of what a generalist is can do. But I ask a student, what are you most passionate about? What do you gravitate towards? If they have a background in psychology or library systems, chances are they might be prone to doing research. They might have a passion or an interest in visual design, and I definitely want to encourage that, but they might at least get their foot in the door from something that innately they are good at. Versus somebody who is a graphic designer, or somebody who maybe was like, an architect, for example. Those kinds of things may be more suited for information design, interaction design, or visual design. And so, while this is a very technical career, I tend to encourage people to follow their passions, because that can help them, stay in that career for many years. And
Yep,
so,
that's
by
why.
looking for that first job instead of being a generalist, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm agreeing. I'm saying it's why I don't bother trying to pretend I'm an artist. I could pretend, but why?
Yeah, and if you want to be a generalist and you're not strong in one of those areas, especially since it's your first job out of school or your first job in your career, that can only work against you. Do what you're good at. Make sure you at least get your foot in the door, and then you can rub elbows with all the other folks with all the other specialties in the UX department, and shadow them and piggyback on their projects, and be better at that and get strong at that on the job. You know.
Great. Thank you. It's a super answer. I'm going to take a quick break to plug a couple of things that I tend to plug at this point in the show, and then we'll get back to Shreya's second question. So first of all, just a reminder, everybody, I'm going to be teaching Acture. I'm going to be doing my 2-day workshop live and online. I'm still here. And you can find that at deltacx.link/DEC, like December 2020. And I'm doing my 2-day workshop and giving you my 9-hour video course for $60, 60. It's usually $900, but I thought I would try to make something good happen in 2020. And so I'm putting that one on sale. And you are welcome to get the video courses, the live workshop, or both for that price. Just mark your calendars for December 3 and 4, where I'll be doing the live workshop. No, it will not be live on YouTube. We will all be in Zoom, so you do have to register if you want to be a part of it. And of course, I like to remind people to please subscribe on the YouTube channel if you enjoy these videos. I go live 2 to 4 times a week, always with fresh content. Don't miss Tuesdays, office hours, Ask Me Anything. And of course, won't you please empathize with the like button? Show it all the possible love you can. Empathize with the like button, and please subscribe. Usability test the subscribe button. Make sure it's working, and ring that bell over on the YouTube universe. That would be great. That I ask for so little. And then the other thing I want to mention is just, of course, Delta CX is a full-service CX and UX agency. I don't just stream on YouTube. I actually do stuff, and you can hire me and my team. Right now, we're working on a 70-person remote observational study for a very famous company. So we actually do the things. I don't just talk about the things. I do the things. All right, so back to Shreya's question, number 2. And I think this is a question, it's a little bit long, so I'll read it slowly, but I think it's a question about the best platforms to use for presenting your portfolio. So Shreya says, people are elevating the way they present their portfolio. How much will Webflow influence a hiring manager compared to Squarespace or UXfolio, considering we don't end up using Webflow at our job?
Great question. Yeah, it depends. I mean, if you want to position yourself as a UX designer that can also do a bit of front end dev, all of those platforms are going to fall a little bit short. You're probably going to want to roll your own website and do it by hand. I have intentionally designed code out of my career. I've worked, yeah, right. I did HTML. I mean, you have to know HTML and CSS to do your job and to do it well. But you don't have to produce code. You can, if that's something that interests you, but Webflow, Squarespace, Wix, UXfolio, those websites, there are limitations. Depends on what you want. Like I said, I designed it out of my career, so I am lazy, quote unquote, in the HTML area. So I use Squarespace, not paid by them,
I use
but I'm very pleased
WordPress,
with the
not
product.
sponsored.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's kind of, Webflow. When I first tried to sign up and use it, I was underimpressed. And maybe I'm just an early adopter at times and find, the dark corners of the application where the bugs tend to be prevalent. So UXfolio is a good website for using, in my opinion, for portfolios. It's easy. It is responsive. That's one of the things you definitely want to make sure as a first impression that you leave on employers, is that if they go onto your website on a mobile device, or if they shrink down that browser because they have a million tabs open, like most of us might, that it responds well and doesn't, do a bunch of somersaults with all the content. So some like Adobe also has a portfolio website that you can use. So really test out what works for you and what you're trying to go for when making that decision. But I mean, really, they're not going to, hopefully at least, they're not going to judge you on the platform that you use. They're going to judge you based on the skills that you present in the work that you display.
Yeah, I would totally agree. My advice to people is typically, I don't care what system you use to present your portfolio, as long as you're doing good work with good storytelling and you're not being limited by the platform you chose. Because sometimes people put up these pictures and I can't click to enlarge them. And when I do a portfolio review, I say, hey, I want to click to enlarge that. And they go, oh yeah, my system doesn't let me. And I go, I'm not okay with that. I don't want excuses.
Yeah, show the content the way that your audience wants to see it, not the way that the software limits you. Certainly.
Yeah. Put
Total
your
side
UX
note,
hat
still
on.
about portfolios.
UX your own
Yes.
portfolio. UX
Ooh,
hat on. I green screen myself.
nice. I like it.
Thanks. Sorry, go ahead. And Shreya says thank you.
That's okay. Oh, you're welcome, Shreya. Um, Small side note. So I had a portfolio site that I had gone into Image Ready with, which is an old Adobe product for slicing images and creating PNGs and JPEGs and so forth.
Wow, I forgot
I
about that.
literally made the entire website out of sliced images. So even text was an image. This was a while ago, and I got plenty
I
of
still
jobs from
see
it.
that. I
So
still see that.
yeah, yeah. I would not recommend it, but I'm just saying that employers are not necessarily concerned with the platform, but more so the content.
Yeah, and let's ask some follow-ups to that for your recommendation, since I know you mentor so many juniors and up-and-coming people. So 2 questions. Should your website have a downloadable resume? And should you also offer your portfolio as a PDF?
The delightful PDF versus website conundrum.
I
Um,
know.
you,
It's the blue and the
it's a
gray.
challenge. I feel like it is. Is the dress blue or is it orange or gray? Um, so, yeah, I mean, while it's good to have a PDF, while it's good to have a downloadable resume, LinkedIn is the place where you can have most of that work, and recruiters can download a downloadable version of your resume from your LinkedIn profile, whether or not you've uploaded one. So they can get that information there. Um, Also think about this. You're going to be managing that asset wherever you are. So on LinkedIn, you can dynamically update it. They can download it and everything. But every time you have something you want to change on it, now you have to change it a bunch of different places. Same with the PDF. I mean, the PDF can be good, but I feel like these static assets are not necessarily a good thing. Like, when a hiring manager is looking for a candidate, they're going to give you maybe 90 seconds. And I'm talking from the second they see your name to the second they say, okay, next. And that means
Yes,
they're
I
going to
keep
look at your
saying
resume.
this.
They're going to, I know, they're going to scan it. Then they're going to go to your website. If it doesn't load in 1 or 2 seconds, they're going to be like, oh yeah, all right, I'll check it out. And they're slightly, unimpressed. And so the more obstacles you put in the way of them in that 90 seconds, the lower chances you have of getting even a call. And so, your portfolio is a tool to get their attention, get them to want to call you. And then once they talk to you in an interview status, a portfolio presentation, then that's your chance to tell a story, which is laid on top of the visuals and the writing that you present in your portfolio. A PDF, I don't know. I think it kind of falls short and is a bit of a disservice to what you can do as a storyteller to weave the narrative of all of the work that you did to create any of the products that you're presenting in your portfolio.
Yeah, I do portfolio reviews, as I'm sure you do too. And someone sent me one the other day, and it was a PDF, and that's not my preferred way to view them, but I'm not going to refuse. You want a review, you'll get it. And it was 91 pages long.
Oh, wow. No, not so much. That's a lot of content.
I felt turned off by the
like
table of contents.
Ooh, ooh. Yeah, for me, a table of contents should be like an image of the product you worked on and maybe the name of it. And it's just like maybe three of your favorite ones or something like that. Maybe six. Six is like, oh gosh, they have 6 projects now. I mean, this coming from a person who has a menu that opens up with 20 items, but
Yeah, I put 9 on
but you
mine.
yeah. Plus, with a PDF, it's good if you're doing in-person interviews where we used to, back when we used to meet in person, and maybe there was a spotty Wi-Fi connection in the meeting room that you were meeting in, or everything's Wi-Fi now, so now there's no more internet cable you can just plug in when the Wi-Fi
I would always
is
bring
spotty.
my computer and I would have everything downloaded onto my hard drive, and I would say,
Oh
it
yeah,
doesn't matter if you have internet or not. Here's my actual prototype of this project. Let me walk you through it.
yeah. Have a backup for your backup, definitely.
Great idea. Thank you. Everybody, keep the questions coming. I can see we have 10 people live on YouTube, but I didn't see how many are on LinkedIn right now. I'll take a look in a moment. But let's talk a little bit about salary expectations and negotiations. Very often when we're talking to a recruiter or HR or even the hiring manager or somebody who's that first line, they'll say, well, what are you making now? Or what do you expect to make? Oh, sorry. Role playing time. Nick, what are you making
No,
now?
no,
Come
no,
on,
no.
tell me live on the
Yeah,
show.
give me the juice. No, golly.
What do we say to these people?
Yeah,
Because I think typically we feel powerless or we feel like we have to answer that question. What is the best way to answer that question?
right. And just like when they ask you if you have any offers on the table, it's that World Series of poker. You don't have to be, combatively secretive or anything like that. But you should have a methodical approach to it. And so with the salary expectations question, if they ask you what are you making now, that shouldn't matter. Typically, they'll start with what do you want to make or what is your rate? And it's like, what is my rate? This is my first job for some people, and for others, it's not so much what the rate is; it's what the range for the role is. And I've got a little ditty that I have for that. So, um, you definitely don't want to overestimate your worth, and you definitely don't want to undercut your worth. So when someone asks, "Oh, well, what is your rate?" You say, "What is the range for this role?" And it's a two-part answer, and it's actually a two-part question to a question. So just like you should have a backup for your backup, you should have a question for that question. And in this case, the question is because you want to make sure that the range is acceptable. You should have a number in there that you're willing to accept. And really, when they say, oh, well, the range is this much to this much, you should have already looked on Glassdoor or at least have your number. And if the company is located in an area that pays higher, maybe that's the pay that they'll give you, maybe not. So no, on Glassdoor, you can look at salaries and it'll show you a little range of salaries for that job, sometimes even at that company, if you know the company name. And so have that number available, or at least in your mind, what you want to make, be realistic, of course. And then say, what's the range for that role? They say, this is the range. Is that acceptable? And then you should say, yes. However, I'd like to meet the team and get a better understanding of what the day-to-day responsibilities are before finalizing on a rate. And chances are they'll probably not be great with that. They might, not allow you to do that. But if they do, it's a good thing because you want to understand what the UX maturity at a company is before you sign up. You want to understand what kinds of UX research they're doing, if they're doing, research-driven design or best guess design, which I know Debbie has a wonderful monologue on not guessing in design, and I agree. Is that the sad rain? Yes,
Sad.
yes, exactly. So sad. They may even ask you, though, that, well, what do you want the range to be? And now you're back to square one with the first question. So looking at Glassdoor, looking at ranges, knowing what you maybe want to get paid is a thing you should have in your back pocket.
Yeah, it is a bit of a weird tango because they'll say, "What are you making?" or "What do you want to be paid?" And typically at this point, I just don't like to play the game anymore. So I've started saying to people, "Look, when you created this job, you came up with a budget of what you were going to pay. You already know what you want to pay. You have a range. You either have a fixed number or you have a range. Let's please cut out the tango dance. Just tell me what this range is." And, or some number in the middle of the range. Like, please just tell me that. And we can cut out a lot of dancing back and forth. And so they'll say, "Oh, okay, we were going to pay this." And sometimes I'll say, "Oh, that works for me." Or I'll say, "Oh, that's a little low." Or, "Oh, is there any flexibility?" But again, it's harder to do this when you're starting out and you're a junior and you feel like I just have to take it. But again, Nick's right, go to Glassdoor and be prepared for appropriate expectations. But if you're not a junior, then I think it's okay to do a little more negotiation or a little bit more poking and to be able to ask the company, just look, the range. What are we doing right now? This is a crappy game. So I don't like games. So just tell me. There was something you just said that I wanted to point back to. You were talking about, about setting proper expectations for some of the UX maturity at the job. I think that's a really important topic to stick with a little bit longer. And that is because I get a lot of questions, especially privately and in coaching calls where people are like, I took, I'm right out of boot camp. I took the first offer I got it. I'm so excited about my first job, but why aren't they mentoring me? Why aren't they coaching me? Why is the work so hard? I'm not sure my boss is happy with me. Why aren't they mentoring me? And I'll say, why didn't you know that before? Or they'll say, how come this company doesn't do any research and they just want me to sketch stuff? And I'll say, why didn't we know this before? So can you talk a little bit about some of the questions that candidates should feel comfortable asking during the interview so they can see if this company is going to give them the environment and support they need?
Absolutely. One of my favorite monologues that I like to deliver with students is around how to look for UX maturity at a company without just asking, like, "Hey, do you even UX?" Obviously not going to get a great response from that. So the question I like to encourage students or candidates to ask is, what is user research like at this company? And that
Great
can be if
question.
you're a designer, an interaction designer, or a researcher. If you're a researcher and you're applying to a research job, chances are their maturity level is a little more advanced. In my upcoming unwritten book that I have yet to title, I imagine that there are 4 phases of, well, 5 if you include no UX support at all. 5 phases of UX adoption. There's none, there's some visual design, there's some interaction design, and then there's some research. See how at the very end there you have research. But then the 4th one is executive support and sponsorship and understanding of user experience design. Once that's there, the whole circle can complete, well, minus the 0, of course. So I like to ask, what is user research like at this company? And they'll maybe give you a handful of responses from the wonderful, we have a lab and you'll be paired with a researcher and you'll do rapid iterative testing and evaluation. Yes, that's music to everyone's ears. And then there are levels of acceptable responses that are not that ideal. And then responses such as like, oh, our CEO, won't do user research or something like that. For
We know
smaller
what
companies,
users like.
we know what users like, right? Or maybe you can encourage our boss to adopt user research now that you're on board, and they
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
look to you for their salvation, and that's a red flag.
I would say another one.
Doing research-driven design.
I think another one is, and I'm seeing this more and more, is we believe user research is looking at Google Analytics, Qualtrics, and Full Story.
No.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of those where user research is quantitative and secondary.
Right. So focus groups is not user research. That is more focused on marketing. There can be some very early wants and needs, but it barely touches true customer experience research when you're doing a group of, hey, do you like this blue? And 50 people raise their hand, and the other 49 maybe don't raise their hand, but they have a really good color in their mind. And so focus groups are going to get drowned out by the louder people. Versus those that might have good ideas and are shy. So doing one-on-one, in my opinion, at least one-on-one user research is going to yield very candid results that will surprise you often.
Yeah, so ask and be prepared to walk away or say no if it's not going to be the environment or support you need, because otherwise you're bitching to me and Nick later, or your mentors, and going, I got this job, but they're not helping me. And I go, yeah, they never planned to help you. Why didn't you know that? So that's another one. I've got a note here that says you wanted to talk a little bit about some things to avoid saying during the interview process.
Wonderful. Yes. Especially, put me on the spot.
I don't know what that is. That's what my note says.
No. Yeah, thank you. It sparked my memory. So, especially starting out as a designer, we feel maybe imposter syndrome or whatever that feeling is of not having adequate skills in the 3 areas to make us a really strong generalist. One of the things you want to never say in an interview, and I rarely say never, but one of the things you definitely want to avoid saying in an interview is that you're bad at something. I'm bad at visual design. I'm not a good user researcher. A better way to say something that means the same thing is to say, I'm not as strong at, or I need to get stronger at visual design. I'd really like to get stronger at visual design to round out my generalist, powerhouse, so to speak. So, reframing the conversation in ways you seek to be strong and being more futuristically growth oriented, rather than I am, stuck in this way right now, and there's areas where I'm deficient. So, positioning yourself as seeking to get stronger in those areas is one of those things that you definitely want to say. Another one is kind of like when you're presenting things, to not necessarily say, oh, I meant to do this, or, oh, that's, that blue needs to change. Don't critique yourself. Kind of like when cooking a meal for friends, maybe you put too much garlic in it, but maybe it's delicious for them. So, don't critique yourself in the interview. Let them do it. And if they have questions, they'll oftentimes ask. And that's your chance to talk about maybe the area that you were concerned about, if they even bring it up. What about you, Debbie? What do you think are some good things to avoid saying in an interview?
I was just going to back you up and just remind our audience that here on the Fun Podcast, I always say, I'm terrible at art and I'm a terrible visual designer, but in the job interview universe, and if they haven't seen the videos, I typically do say, you know what, most of my artistic talent ended up in music, and visual design isn't my strength, but I have done art direction, so I've got the art ideas, and I know I can look for the consistency and the accessibility and things like that. I can work with artists and speak with artists, but I might not be your number one choice for doing the art. It's just not my strength, and I'd rather be at a job that plays to my strengths. Now that's because I'm not looking to try to get better at visual design. I'm about to turn 49, so I know I'm not going to get better at this point. I know I'm unfortunately quite mediocre or just below. But there's a slide I put up where I've drawn one of my dogs, and it looks like a 4-year-old drew it. That's like, and it says Debbie, age 47. So I prefer to be honest about those things. I might be saying things that we wouldn't recommend for everybody, but I also feel like I can get away with it at this age. But so I would have to agree with you. But I think anything that I think it's a fine line and it's going to take practice, but I don't want people to sound unconfident, but I don't want them to sound arrogant. And it's going to take you a
Oh,
while
certainly.
and probably some practicing with your mentor or coach to find the fine line for that. And also, I don't like people to be too over rehearsed with their interviews. I coached someone once who had evidently been like practicing writing his answers for things and trying to memorize them. And so talking to him was so much fun. And then I would ask him an interview question, and he would go into like this robot face where he was starting to like try to read back from memory his
Mhm.
answer. And all of a sudden his voice got very plain. And he was just saying these things to me like this. And I said, no, no, no. What happened to the fun, amazing guy I just met 30 seconds ago? No, no. So be prepared with answers for common questions, but don't over memorize them. And maybe, Nick, can you tell us some common questions that UX people might be asked in a job interview, especially juniors who maybe are just now getting their first job interviews?
Sure. Let's see. What is your approach to research is a good one. Oftentimes, the quintessential, what was a challenge that you had and how did you overcome it, or when would describe a time you disagreed with a superior and how you overcame that or what you did in that situation. And obviously it's about design. Tell us about a time when you disagreed with your manager about a design direction and what the result was from that. Those are a little bit behavioral, but also probably strategic about how you view design and how, while you're being tasked to be the expert, there is always somebody else who can approve or veto that design direction that you're proposing.
Yeah, and I think one that gets asked a lot as well is, what is your UX process? And I
Oh
find
yeah.
that there's a lot more wrong answers to that than you would imagine. And my favorite wrong answer, and I tell this story a lot in the podcast, is a guy I was interviewing who I said, okay, well, and he was claiming to be the full stack of full stacks, UX, UI, front end dev. He could do everything. He was the amazing flying purple squirrel. And I said, what's your UX process? And he said, I just open up Adobe Illustrator and I start designing.
Mhm.
And I said, oh, no, not your
Oh,
tools, your process. And he goes, yeah, just open Illustrator.
oh, wow. Yeah, I guess
I see
I got
you're
nothing.
impressed, Nick.
No. So I'm at a loss for words, literally. Um, it's interesting. I think every company has a different process, and every project is going to have different needs. While you can describe this beautiful infographic of, ideate and iterate and research and launch and, all of these more idealistic processes, chances are you can show them that process, and I would encourage that if you are proficient in those steps, but also with the disclaimer that every project, every company is going to have a different set of needs and timelines that are going to impact what you're able to deliver as far as each of those steps of the process is concerned. And you should be flexible for that. If you have the expectation that you present a process and it's going to be that way at the company, you're going to set yourself up for disappointment. And you should be, flexible to learn how it's done at that company. But yeah,
Fantastic
Illustrator
way to
is
put that.
maybe not the start.
No, or not. No. Yeah, and my answer, usually I say to people, well, I'm a big fan of the user-centered design process, and I typically walk through it,
Mhm.
and then I say, but of course we have to be strategic about that process, and we can't always do every phase and task all the way through because there's going to be timeline and budget constraints. So part of my approach is to be strategic and pick and choose the right things to do and the amount of time that we'll spend on them. So I do tend to cover that, what you said. So it's a great reminder to whatever your process is, whether you believe in double diamond or design thinking or something else. I think you have to remind the people you're going to work with that there's also an element of strategy to this, that we have to decide the right things to do and how long they'll take. And I know many juniors are not good at that yet. I don't expect juniors to be strategic yet.
Certainly. Yeah, business objectives versus user needs. That's the fine line that you have to learn to balance and work with your peers to accomplish.
Yes, but I think one wrong answer to that question, and you can tell me how you see this, is I find sometimes people who really aren't strong in UX yet, they might be stronger in front-end dev or visual design. Sometimes when I ask them their UX process, they say, I really keep the user in mind. And that's pretty much the whole answer, keeping users in mind, or I've got the customer in my heart, or I'm really focused on customer needs. And to me, that's not a UX process. So what do you think about an answer like that? What does that tell you about the candidate?
That they maybe haven't done the activities involved with more user-centered design methodologies, aside from visual design. I'm talking, wants and needs exercises, journey mapping,
Task
affinity
analysis.
mapping, task analysis, all of the things that truly glean that information to make a product either meaningful or just exist. I think the students need more experience, or candidates need more experience. You got to show the math. You can't just show the answer, and that answer is almost intangible at best. You got to be able to say how you keep the user in mind, not just that you do keep the user in mind.
Yeah, how do you know what the user wants, needs, does, prioritizes, etc.? Because otherwise we've made it up. We only have 10 minutes left, and so I want to make sure we talk a little bit about a couple of bad habits people sometimes have, or at least I think they're bad. We'll see what you think about them. Let's talk about people who redesign companies' sites and either send that to them, I'm going to make a better version of Yelp and I'm going to send it to Yelp and see if they'll hire me, or I'm going to make a better version of, I'm going to improve something about Spotify, and then when I interview there, I'm going to show them how I made it better. Should people do this? Pros and cons.
Sure. Pros for fun, not for work. If you want to imagine what Spotify might look like with a brighter interface, have fun, but don't propose that to any company you're interviewing with, especially not with Spotify if you're interviewing with them, for example. I've got a lot that I've actually authored about this. It takes a village to make a product. As even if we're a UX designer, there are engineers, there are product managers, there are product marketing people that are all collaborating and working together to boost this product's visibility and its adoption and everything. And so as an outsider of a company that you're applying to, you don't know what those business objectives are. You oftentimes will not know what those user needs are. You're using your lens of what your experience is. And trust me, I want to do redesigns, but I'm not trying to propose them. I'll probably do blog articles for fun about imagine if this product had this additional feature. Wouldn't that be cool? More imaginative. But additionally, if you are interviewing in a company and you redesign their products, chances are you might encounter the person who did that design. And so you're walking on real thin ice by how you critique it. You're sure to offend somebody, be it designer or any other of those previous collaborative folks, such as PMs and product marketing folks, when you give your critique of the before and then show them your after. And, like I said, you're only one person. There's an army of people working on these products. And it's just, you're going to dump a ton of time into very little perspective. And it's probably, you're better off creating a product from scratch that has nothing to do with any company that you're interviewing with, and just create that product from scratch. Go through the process as best you can, make some designs. I think you're going to have better success than trying to redesign an app or product.
Yeah, everything you just said, I think it can accidentally make you look pretty arrogant if you say, hey, I know I don't work there. I know I don't know anything about what's going on internally or why you prioritize things. I didn't interview any of your users, or I don't even know who your personas are, but I've got a better idea. And I go, oh, holy crap, you are out of here. Like, do not want. And I even saw, I don't remember what company it was, but I recently saw a head of design at some well-known company, and now I can't remember what it is, tweeting like, please stop emailing me redesigns of my own company site.
Yeah.
So no. Let's see. Okay, we talked about that. There's a couple of things I'd written down that we must get to. One was, it sounded like you wanted to respond to something I had posted on LinkedIn the other day about how when I had some apprenticeships open, I poked around on LinkedIn at a couple of people that I thought could be interesting. And the idea of an apprenticeship, of course, being let me be the bridge between whatever education you got and that first job, knowing that many first jobs want to see real work experience. How do you get that without the first job? It's a mess. So I'm messing with this apprenticeship thing. And there were some people who I didn't invite to my apprenticeship program because LinkedIn made it look like they found their first job. And I find that there's a lot of UX juniors who are putting stuff on LinkedIn to make it look like they're working in UX even if they're not. And very often all of a sudden they're part of Sparkly Hat Incorporated, which is their own freelancing, the DL agency. It's my own, all of a sudden they're part of some company or they're freelancing and they're making it seem like I'm doing research and UX design and as a freelancer. And then I go, oh, you got your first job. You don't need my apprenticeship program. What's your opinion on people who are doing that? Is that honest? Is it dishonest? Is it when do we post something on LinkedIn that's aspirational versus the truth?
So many thoughts.
You got 4 minutes, kid.
All right, I'll try my best. So, it's easy when we're first starting out in our career, and I think experience has a lot to do with it. That we want to inflate our status. Homer Simpson's "must lie on resume" comes to mind. Must lie on resume, he says, and that's I would recommend against that. Just flat out, don't put that you are at an agency that you started and that you've been at for 8 years. They're going to think you have 8 years of experience when in fact maybe you don't. On the flip side of that, the seeking new opportunities thing is a little bit more like saying unemployed, and I'm not necessarily a fan of that either. Companies want to hire people that are already at other companies, usually, and then they'll look elsewhere because it shows that you are employable and that you are employed. So seeking new opportunities isn't my favorite tagline for you to put on your LinkedIn profile, and neither is
open to work.
Open to work, yeah, that I'm surprised at that one, but kind of not surprised. Additionally, the title, I would say aspirational, like you mentioned, Debbie, like product designer. Bam, it's what you are, not necessarily where you are in your career journey. And I think that's important because when you inflate your position or say that you're at some agency that you created and that you've been there for 8 years, they're going to have that expectation of you. And also, like, people are going to pass you up. Oh, they have their own agency. They must be just swamped with work if they have their own agency.
Even
when
I
in
get
reality,
that.
you're like, oh yeah, for sure. Yep. And so, making sure that you are honest in the way that you represent yourself online is going to be super critical for getting the people that honestly want you as a designer to join their team or join their project. So, it goes both ways. So I would say, stay true to yourself without overinflating.
That's great. Thank you. And even if you're only pretending you've been at your own agency for 6 months since you finished that boot camp, remember, if someone interviews you, they might be like, tell me about the work you're doing right now at that agency. And you're either going to have to lie or make it up, or then you're going to say, oh, it's just me as a freelancer and I haven't gotten any work yet. Awkward. Yeah. Awkward. I don't have I guess I have a graphic for that. Awkward. So it's my flying red flag. So Anyway, we are just about out of time. I can't believe it. The time just flew. We might have to do a part 2 at some point. Nick, thank you so much. You were fantastic. I think your answers were great, and the notes we had ahead of time were just perfect. And we had lots of people joining us live, but they were very quiet, so we must have been answering the questions before they had them, like two good UX people would. So I would say just tell people again where they can find you and follow you and buy cool shirts like the one you're wearing.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll zoom out a little bit for that. So I'm on Facebook.com/I love UX design, Twitter.com/I love UX design, LinkedIn, I love UX design, Etsy, I love UX design, and a very small amount of videos on YouTube, I love UX design. Yeah, so find me on those places, connect with me. Happy to chat some more. And Debbie, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Look forward to doing it again.
Thank you. And quick show notes, everybody. We've just planned a special podcast for Monday, November 16th. It's going to have Larry Marine, and we are giving everybody homework. So keep an eye on either Larry's LinkedIn, where he posted today, or my LinkedIn, where I'm going to post tomorrow, about your homework, because we're going to be teaching you something fresh about observational research. So mark your calendars for November 16 and take part in the homework if you can. We're not going to make you go out into the COVID world if it's not safe, but we are going to make you think a little bit about observational research. So please join for that. And otherwise, as usual, won't you please usability test the subscribe button, press like if you're in YouTube so that you tell the algorithm this wasn't so terrible. And other than that, I want to thank Nick again and see everybody very soon, and I will play us out of here. Everybody be well. Thanks again. Thanks for watching. Delta CX is available for consulting and projects related to CX and UX strategy, leadership, training, problem finding, problem solving, and innovation. Learn more at deltacx.com.